The Rogue Invitational and the 2024 season has come to a close. And I'm going to recap the Rogue Invitational today, give you my thoughts on all the events, the athletes, my performance. Spoiler alert, if you don't know already, I won this show. That means I went 8 for 9 this year. I'm going to make a different recap video on the year in a couple of days. But for now, let's talk about the Rogue Invitational. Now, moved to Aberdeen, Scotland this year. I thought that was a good choice in ways, a bad choice in ways. It's a tough place to get to. It's very out of the way. I flew to London and then drove 8 hours. You can fly closer, but there's no international direct flights. That's sort of the downside. The upside, the venue was so cool. Architecturally was amazing. The hotel was really good. And the fans in Scotland are just next level compared to everywhere else in the world I've found. Now, we got there, we did the familiarization. Now, there's something with Rogue that a lot of people wouldn't know is that they are particularly strict on what you're allowed to do before the event. In every other show, we can touch the equipment, we can pick it up, we can try it, we can do whatever we'd like to it until we're happy. At Rogue, we weren't allowed to touch anything, move anything, feel anything. All you could do was look at it and sort of get a rundown. The other different thing that we were briefed on in familiarization was all of these different little rules. So we introduced buttons for the first time. I'll go over my opinion on that shortly. We had squares that we had to drop stuff into rather than just dropping things over a line. And a few different things where it's rules that we're just not accustomed to. Now, as athletes, we were told we should have known it's not that hard. It's just hard to remember in the moment sometimes. Now, let's get into the events themselves. Event number 1 was the max deadlift. Now, I think everyone knew that Thor was going to be the heavy favorite here. Going in, I did think that I had a chance to beat him. That being said, I've had a back, I don't want to call it an injury. I have no diagnosis, but about every third day, I've had a bad deadlift day. Funny enough, I was with Thor in Vegas. We were deadlifting together, and my max was about 380 kilos, and it moved poorly, and that would have put me dead last in this contest. The next week, I pulled 420 kilos, very easy, and my back was in no pain. So I was a bit apprehensive. In warm-ups, unfortunately, it was a bad back day, and I wasn't quite sure what to do. I was the last person to put in my attempts. You couldn't see anyone else's, so there was no competitive advantage, but I was battling with myself internally on what I was going to do. I went out and I bet on myself. I said, I'm going to open on 420. That's the heaviest opener I've ever done by far. My thought was I could open on 420, potentially pull something heavier than Thor on the second attempt, and then force him into something he didn't want to do on the third attempt, and then just take a pass regardless. Now, myself, Bobby, and Thor all opened on 420 kilos, and we all hit 420 kilos. It felt bad for me. It felt sore. It was definitely pain limited, and I couldn't see the footage, so I didn't really know. But I knew that there were some guys going to the next bar, which was 430 kilos, and I knew that I had to jump over those guys to stay as close to Thor as possible. So again, I just bet on myself. I was not confident that it was going to happen. I went 440 kilos. Thankfully, I ended up hitting that weight. Thor's second lift was 1,010 pounds. Absurd. It still didn't look that hard for him. He wanted to go for the record. He had a conversation about what maybe the compensation could be for that. They couldn't come to an agreement, so he didn't. And I think there's maybe a 50-50 that he could have hit the raw deadlift record at 1,040 pounds on the day. So hats off to Thor. He is a class above. In third place on the deadlift was Matt Reg. In fourth place tied was, in fourth place tied was Evan Singleton, Bobby Thompson, and potentially one other, but a couple of tied on that 420 kilo marker. Tom Stoltman notably pulled 398 kilos. This is 12 kilos down from what he did at Strongest Man on Earth. He's been with his new coach for only a few weeks, and I think you got to give him the grace of give it a little while and see how it goes. And so I expect that to rise over the course of the year. Tom's coach was there. I met him, really nice dude, and they seem to have a really good relationship. And I've said it many times. I really hope that Tom gets back to 100%. That's who I want to compete against. That's who I want to go toe-to-toe with, is Tom at 100. Not Tom when he's not prepared, not Tom when he's hurt, Tom when he's motivated, happy, excited, and ready to compete hard. And of course, pain-free. Now, my back didn't get substantially worse along the back conversation after those deadlifts, but it was really painful in the moments, and you sort of have to throw caution to the wind when it comes to competition. It was definitely sore, but not too bad going into event number 2. This was the farmers into log press. I was interviewed before this by Kiki Dixon. She said, what can we expect from you on this? And I said, you can expect an event win. I was very confident. I didn't think anyone could touch me on this event. And I made a mistake, unfortunately. So I took the farmers, no problem at all. Log, I got stuck straight in. I picked it up and it felt light. And when it felt light, I thought, cool, I'm just gonna rip through this first one. I stood up too quickly. The log slipped down my body. And then I finished the clean, maybe around chest height. And then I had to do this like really weird sort of split to get myself back under the log. And that's just being an athlete and fighting for your life. There's a really good still image of me like split cleaning the log. And it's not a recommended strategy. It's not something you should do. But in competition, when it's a timed event, and this is my living, there's no option for me but to continue to fight. If you're at your own competition and you make no money from it, don't put yourself in that type of risk to tear a quad tendon, to hurt your back, anything like that. But I knew that those seconds would be extremely valuable if I didn't, or if I put the log back down and tried to pick it up again. I managed to save it, which I think was maybe my best strength feat from the weekend, but I'm very, very angry with myself at making such a stupid mistake. So I hit those 3 reps on the log. Tom Evans beat me by 0.02. Shout out to Tom. He was not on my radar as someone who could beat me in this event, but he certainly will be moving forward. Tom Stoltman came in 3rd. He was a handful of seconds behind. Definitely one of those guys where if I put the log down, he would have jumped over me. This put me in the lead by, I think, 5 points at this stage, potentially 6. And this started perfect. In the pressing event, Thor came last. There was a couple of issues during this event, just logistically with Rogue. Now, Thor came last because he only got 1 rep on the log, and it was relatively slow. I just don't think his pressing power is obviously not back yet. There's a psychological side, there's a physical side, I believe there's an age side, and he's getting up there in age as well. It's hard to get those things back, I would imagine, and we are seeing it. You don't really see someone take time away and then come back in full force at every single event. And I think it'll just take him a bit of time. But again, I hope he gets back to that stage because I hope he continues to push. Now, that was the results of the event. The problems with the event, 2 things. 1, Tom Stoltman and Melissa Peacock went out. And we had this cadence where it would say 60 seconds, we would walk out, 30 seconds, 10 seconds, stand by, and then a beep. And that's when we knew to go. When Tom and Melissa walked out, people are saying that there was no 10-second warning. There definitely was. 100% I heard it backstage.
Female athlete as well. But she is a powerful athlete.
She's so strong. She's definitely the shortest, right?
And everyone who was watching the TV backstage sort of looked at each other like, are they going to go? But the problem was they didn't have 60 seconds from when they walked out. So I think they were not even considering that it was maybe their time to go. They're both at a chalk bowl before they go off to the place to actually start the event. And then it says 10 seconds. And maybe they thought it was an error, but it certainly wasn't appropriate. They should not have been expected to run over to the start mat and then start. Thankfully, this time was corrected, so Tom and Melissa both got the times that they should. Now, to speak on the women quickly, we did this medley with them, 1 man, 1 woman, and I thought that was really fun. I thought that was a good way to have some sort of direct competition. It's better than going by ourselves, for sure, and gives a different tone to going head-to-head with someone you're competing against, and a bit of perspective on the speed of the men and the women and the strength of the men and the women, and I really, really did enjoy that. So that was one other problem. This is a self-inflicted problem by Thor. Allegedly, he was in the washroom when they called his name to go out, and they call your name really early, probably too early, if I'm being honest. And he was not prepared, he was not ready. And by the time he got out there, he was still fumbling around trying to put his wrist wraps on and chalk, and that's 100% on him. The Tom one, that can be cleaned up with some logistics, but when you're an athlete, you just have to be ready to go. Thor knows that. He's a competitor, he's a professional, and that'll be something that gets cleaned up next time. Now, event number 3 was the inverse stones. This is the one that I said I was looking forward to the most because I haven't had to do stones in a really long time. We took 275 to 420 pound stones to barrels. This is different than the hitching post setup we've done in the past. And at the end of this, we had a buzzer. And I'll talk about that in a second. But just a note on the times. When you go over the hitching post, you can just throw the stone and move on. With the barrel, you have to take a second to make sure it's there, and the orientation was a bit different. The heights of the barrels was a bit different. So we can't compare the results here to the results from previous years where they've done these stones over hitching post. Now, I was fortunate enough to go last in this event because Rogue does first place overall, goes last in the event. I personally don't agree with that structure, even though I benefit from it quite a bit. I think you should be rewarded with the event that comes before. Nonetheless, I was going last. The two biggest competitors in my eyes in this was Tom and Thor. For me to be able to try to beat one of them, I thought would be an uphill battle, and I thought third would be a really good result. Tom went before Thor in this event, and it was quite strange to me watching backstage because he was very slow and methodical, and usually Tom with stones just absolutely firing through. But there's something about these that made him a little bit unsure, and he just took an extra few seconds on every stone. Then he celebrated for 2 or 3 seconds before he remembered that the buzzer had to be hit. Thor then went, and this was absolutely unbelievable, an unparalleled performance, one motioning every single inverse stone, and finished in a time of about 27 seconds, beating Tom by nearly 10 seconds on a 5 series stone run. King of the Stones is definitely a title that's debatable at the moment. I was last out in this event, like I said, and something about this, I was just not comfortable. I didn't feel aggressive. I didn't feel excited. I couldn't get into the moment, but I overcame it really well. And I knocked out the first 2 stones, one motion, third stone felt good, fourth stone felt okay. And on this set of stones, the 5th stone actually feels easier than the 4th stone. I don't know if it's shape or what, but I remember that from doing these in 2022. I went straight onto the 5th stone, loaded that, no issues, hit the buzzer, and finished in a time of about 31 or 32 seconds. Now let's talk about the buzzer. So Tom didn't hit the buzzer initially. This didn't cost him any points because he probably wasted about 3 seconds, and I beat him by about 6 or 7 seconds. But it's a new thing for strongman. And strongman has been criticized in the past for using hand timers for events that pay 6 figures. We shouldn't be relying on that. We should have something more precise. And the button rectifies that issue. And what the button doesn't rectify is if athletes just totally forget that it exists. And then the question becomes, do we want to put the onus on the referee and their hand timer or on the athlete to hit a buzzer? Personally, I would rather everything be on me, and I need to remember to hit that buzzer to finish the event. Paul Smith put out a story, I haven't seen it, but apparently Paul Smith put out a story saying that, agree or disagree with the buzzer, you would never see Mitch Hooper not hitting the buzzer. And that is 100% my attitude, and I totally agree. If you're well prepared, you keep your head on your shoulders, you have your mind about you, you should be able to hit that buzzer no problem. And if we introduce it into a few shows, it's going to be stock standard, normal, second nature. But the onus is 100% on the athlete. The one good thing about the first introduction of the buzzer, regardless of some sort of funny moments, I don't believe it happened one time for the men or the women where they forgot to hit the buzzer and that actually costed them any sort of placing. The referees, and I don't believe that they should have, but the referees immediately would tap the athlete and remind them to go hit the buzzer. I think that's on the athlete. I think let them do whatever, let them make their mistake, let them learn from this. But we don't get that sort of coaching on any other elements of an event. So I wish that didn't happen. That to me is on the athlete, and we should take full responsibility. So that was the end of day 1. I was in the lead at this stage by a good handful of points. I want to say 5 points over Thor. And with a pressing event on day 2, I knew that Tom was going to be the biggest threat, and I had a reasonable gap on him. I want to say 7 or 8 points. Now, this took us into day 2. I wake up in the morning and my back was in not a good shape. It's lower back, and I've got a nerve pain that goes out to the left a little bit. My upper left glute gets really, really, really tight, and to the point where bending over to touch my toes was very difficult in the morning. I went and I got some physio treatment. I spent a bit of time in the hot tub, did everything I could to loosen up as much as possible. And I was very thankful that event 1 was the push carry drag. And this meant that there wasn't a substantial loaded hinge in event 1, and I could actually warm myself into the day. Now, the push carry drag was very interesting. Again, in familiarization, we weren't allowed to touch these things. We didn't know how the hay bale thing would move. and we didn't have any sort of idea of how heavy the sled would be. Not a huge deal for me because I was going last again because I was in first place overall. But I think it really disadvantages the guys who go in the first groups. And if you're going in the first group because you're down in the standings and you don't have the experience of watching someone else and knowing how heavy the sled is, you're really stuck behind the 8-ball. And at both the Rogue and at the Arnold, if you get behind, it's very hard to climb yourself back because of those small advantages in the order of competition. Now, I was watching people with the bail, and it just basically seemed that the more aggressive you were, the faster the thing went. And Tom Evans had a really good run on this, and it sort of just goes back to football days. You just have to hit it hard, 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 because it's got sand in the bottom, and you push, and it'll kick back at you, and you almost have to stay on top of it before the sand kicks back to be able to get the most from each push. Tom Stoltman set a blazing time on this. It was phenomenal. His arm over arm was really, really good, which at Strongest Man on Earth, it was okay, but it wasn't phenomenal. This performance for Tom was absolutely phenomenal. I picked up a tip from him backstage on picking up the Husafell effectively. And note for competitors, I'm backstage asking tips, asking questions all the way up until the event actually happens. I love to pick these things up. When I'm in the room with the 9 other strongest men on the planet who are the best strongmen in the world, there's such a plethora of knowledge that I'm not going to let go to waste. And again, I would encourage you guys to take advice from anyone. I'll listen to fans, and either I'll try to use the information or I'll disregard it. But information nonetheless is really, really good. And I think that little tip helps me out. To give clarity on what that is, picking up the sandbag, it's very big, a little bit loose, a little bit heavy. And if you try to just pick it into your lap, it gets stuck in your knee. So I watched Tom with the comp weight. He picked it up off the floor slightly and then sort of caught it underneath straight away before he picked it up any further. And then his hands were under and he could just pull it to his stomach and walk around. And that's what I implemented in comp. Now this was really fun because this was head to head, and this was me and Thor head to head, which is, I think, what everyone expected before the show, is that him and I would be the lead contenders for the title. It's also just 2 high-profile names going head-to-head. He's a friend of mine, but when it comes to competition, of course, we want to rip each other's heads off, figuratively speaking. So, got the push elements done, and I was the fastest of the whole field on the push elements. With the sandbag, I had a few issues picking it up. I think this is something that I need to train a little bit harder, a little bit more often. Maybe costing me 3 seconds or so, nothing too major. Made my way around. Now, I think this Husafell should have been heavier or further. There's just an element of it that it was a bit of a just formality. Same thing with the push element. Those 2 are things that everyone could get done. And this was really just an arm over arm contest where you could get yourself in a bit of a head start. So I'm of split minds of it, to be honest. I think in one side, why are we including things that don't really separate people in terms of strength? But I also do sort of like the buy-in thing that they do it in CrossFit as well, where it's a small pre-exhaust, like the farmer's walk, like the bail push, like the Husafell bag carry. We can all do it, but then you're going to be a little bit tired when you get to the arm over arm. And Rogue has established that they're a different style of competition. They are a medley style of competition, and that's something that I really like, because in 6 events, it's hard to expose every weakness someone might have. But in those 6 events, if you have multiple instances where you're having multiple different events that you have to complete, there's really nowhere to hide. So I got the push done, I got the carry done, onto the drag. It was going really, really well at first, but as my forearms started to get more pumped up, it was hard for me to keep a grip of the rope. And I got to the arm over arm first. I might have had 5-second advantage on Thor, which I was very happy with in the moment, because those first 2 elements are things that he should be really good at. But a couple of errors on the arm over arm that I was not happy with. When I look at the video back, I was really cutting my pull short. I wasn't reaching as far forward as I could have, and I think I lost about a foot on each pull because of that. Over time, that adds up to 2 or 3 extra pulls. And then at the very end, I didn't clarify on what the finish line actually was. And in most instances, you're going to have a finish line and the front of the sled has to come over that. And the way that the arm over arm was set up, we couldn't actually see a finish line. I didn't know, my fault 100%, that it had to actually be against the steel. And what happened was I pulled the sled and it got really close, and there's like a very, very tiny lip and then the steel. Where if it was early in the pull, you just blow over that lip and hit the steel straight away, no problem, like Thor did, like Tom did. But it was at the very end of one of my pulls, so I felt a extra level of resistance, a little, just like a little stopping point. My hand slipped on the rope. That's why I hit the buzzer the first time. But I looked at the ref because I wasn't quite sure if that was it. And he immediately told me, no, you're not done. Then my hands were slipping on the rope. I cost myself another good 5 seconds there. And then I ended up pulling it into the meadow, hit the buzzer, and I was quite angry at myself at the time. I didn't realize I still came third in the event behind Tom and Thor, which to me is an acceptable placing, but the performance of the event was unacceptable and something that I definitely need to clean up moving forward. Now, I lost 2 points to Tom here, 1 point to Thor, and at this stage, I believe I had a 5-point lead on Tom, something like that, and maybe a 4-point lead on Thor. Again, with the pressing coming last, I wasn't super worried about Thor. I was aware of Tom because he was going to be good at the last events as well. This moves us into the yoke into power stairs. Now, when this event came out, the yoke was listed at just over 900 pounds, and I wasn't super happy about that because I was hoping it would be a heavier yoke that would slow people down a lot, and that just wasn't the case. That being said, I am very fast with yoke, and this earned me a little bit of a gap after we started. Now, the most interesting thing about this event was that we were 5 people wide. So you had the bottom 5 go, and then the top 5 go. This format, I think, is the most exciting format for fans. So we take the yokes, and you can see from the side, you can see who's the fastest and who's lagging behind. I had a great yoke run, probably the best of the year for me. Just perfect, picked it up fast, felt really fast during it, dropped it and straight into those power stairs. I felt agile this weekend. I felt light. I felt like I could move really well. Power stairs, 500 pounds, felt like nothing. 550 felt like nothing. 600 was a little bit heavy, but not too bad at all. The one really, really nice thing was that the power stairs weren't excessively high. And this didn't give a disproportionate advantage to Tom and Thor that they would have had if the steps were a few inches higher. I think other promoters should take this on, but I think they should make the power stair implements heavier. This way, it does not have a disproportionate height advantage, but it still tests overall power stair strength really well. Now, again, there was a buzzer at the end of this. I believe that everyone hit the buzzer on time, which was good. On the ladies' side, shout out to Sam Beliveau, who dove Superman style into the buzzer. We were then subsequently told in the men's side we weren't allowed to do that. I think they were just worried about people getting hurt. Now, in terms of the event itself, I went out, yoke was fast, I was in the lead. Evan Singleton was about 2 yoke lengths behind me by the time that I dropped it. I knew I was in the lead going into the power stairs, and I just thought, okay, you need to execute perfectly, which I did for the most part. I misplaced my feet a couple of times on the 600-pound power stair. I have to clean that up to be a little bit sharper next time. But this was enough to get the event win. And this event went perfect for me results-wise because I came first, Evan came second. I believe Thomas Evans came third, and then we had Thor and Tom coming in after. So I gained a number of points on both Tom and Thor, giving me a reasonable buffer going into the last event. Now, I really needed that. If I dropped a few points, the last event would have been very stressful. And I was concerned about the last event, and I'll talk about this in a second, but those couple of extra points feel so good when you're in the lead. People imagine, and when you just watch spreadsheets, okay, Mitch is in the lead, building the lead, building the lead, building the lead. You would imagine that I'm backstage, happy as a clam, no worries, this is in the bag. That's just not the case. It never feels like it's in the bag. I'm always concerned. I'm always paranoid. I'm always thinking about who's going to do what, and if I do this, what happens? And that's, to me, how it has to be. And I try to just wipe the slate clean on every single event, imagine that we're all tied, and then let the foot off the gas only after I've won the whole show. So I went into the last event with a 7-point lead on Thor and a 9-point lead on Tom. essentially, this meant if I pressed the first implement in this series, which is the kettlebell, I would win the show. Seems simple enough, but I was very concerned for the sake of the show that the kettlebell wouldn't have been a good first implement, because I think for us, that was harder than the sear dumbbell, and I think that is harder than a 170 axle. And I brought this to the attention of the referees before the contest started. Because of some of the issues that happened with Rogue last year, I just really wanted the event to go well. And the size of that kettlebell and trying to hold it locked out well is very difficult. So we were told that we would have a little bit of grace. It wouldn't be the same strict lockout as you would have on something like a dumbbell or a log. But we were told we needed a moment of control with the kettlebell in order to get a good down signal. So I was confident that I could win, but I didn't feel guaranteed in any way. The first two guys go out, neither of them hit the kettlebell, and myself, and I'm sure the promoters and the announcers and the fans were concerned that this was going to be a major problem. The next two guys go out, they smoke the kettlebell. The next two guys go out, they smoke the kettlebell. The next two guys go out, and lo and behold, I was 100% wrong. And I think the kettlebell, as I first implement here, I think it went really, really well. And shout out to Rogue for just continually taking these chances on events where it is a risk, it is a chance, but it turned out to be the perfect weight, the perfect new implement, something that the vast majority of guys were capable of, but was hard for a few. That's what you want from a strongman show. So perfect. I don't love when I'm wrong, but I love to learn, and I was wrong. I was 100% wrong, and I think that was a great way to start the event. So I get out to the kettlebell. I was head-to-head with Thor. Essentially, it was a formality. Press the kettlebell, you win. First attempt, I lock the kettlebell out, I get the down commands, boom, contest is over. Now, I did get a fast down commands, and I've looked at the footage because I'm conditioned now to be hypercritical of myself. I think I had one of the softer down calls with the kettlebell. I think Thor also had one of the softer calls with the kettlebell. But for both of us, there was a moment of control that we were asked for. And I believe that was a better lockout than anyone who didn't get the call for the kettlebell. So that's that. I went on to the sear dumbbell, and I didn't have to do this, but I also wasn't exactly sure how points lined up because we were brought onto the stage pretty much straight away. And so I couldn't do calculations backstage. So I thought, okay, well, I'll press the sear bell and we'll see how it goes. So I missed the first one. I hit the second time I tried when it came back down to my shoulder, and it felt heavy to me. And I'm going to get a sear dumbbell in the off-season. This is another thing I need to work on. I'm going to talk about that in a second. There's a number of things from this show that I'm just not happy about personally. So I pressed the sear dumbbell, I locked it out, and then I was looking over at Thor, and I think I've had some people asking me why I was doing that. And the reason I was doing that is because I knew at this stage I didn't have to win the show. Sorry, I didn't have to do more to win the show. And if Thor was struggling on the dumbbell or the kettlebell, and I was just going by myself for a minute, just plugging away while Thor watched me or whatever, I wasn't particularly interested in that. But if Thor continued to press on, I thought it would be a really special moment for him and I to be pressing that last axle together. And this is more of a thing for me, for the fans. Now, I go to the axle after Thor locks out the dumbbell, which, by the way, we'll pop up a quick video of it. He literally presses 250 pounds from about here and locks it up. That is absurd, absolutely absurd. One of the most underrated things from this weekend. I don't know how on earth he manages to do that. We go to the first axle. This is not a heavyweight axle for me. My world record is 218 kilos. This was 170 kilos. I pull it to my stomach, I flip my hand over as usual, and when I pull it, I hear a click in my right bicep. It gets to my stomach, I clean, I press, and then I feel my bicep just feel, is it still on? Did I tear it? It was still on. It felt a little bit sore, but nothing major. And this, to anyone who says I should complete final events, this is exactly why I shouldn't complete final events. The reason that I was open to it is because this is the last show of the year and I have months and months to recover and prepare for the next show. I watched Thor and he presses the last one. He presses the first axle and we move on to the last one together. Again, watching him, because I'm not going to have him struggling on the third axle or the first axle and me go on to the second. And if I start struggling on the second, it's sort of a flat ending to the show. He locks out the 170 axle. We meet at the chalk bowl. Nice, quick little moment. I tell him, let's get this together. I go over to the heavy axle, and I was really worried about my biceps. My cue on this was just to keep my arms long and try to just explode a deadlift as fast as I could. I managed to do that. I got it up. I pressed it very easily, locked it out. And for the first time in quite a while, I had a moment where I finished an event, the crowd cheered because I won the whole show. I've won sort of anticlimactically a lot of times this year. And so that was a great way to finish the season, finishing that last axle. Thor didn't quite get there, but has shown tremendous progress on his axle overhead pressing. I think his log is probably the only thing that needs to catch up in order to save a handful of points in future events. Now, to summarize my performance, I spoke with Coach Laws, and we sort of said B+. My training was so good going into this. I was so much better in training than I was in competition here, and I've been kicking myself for that a bit. Now, I came away with the competition victory, but I have to find ways to motivate myself, and I just wasn't as good as I should have been. I got to get my back cleaned up. I think it wouldn't have changed points, but I think I could pull 1,000 raw without back pain, and that is going to be required at some stage. I think in the log press, I've had issues with the cleans a couple of times, and I just need to groove that clean and work it harder and be a bit more disciplined on that. That's another spot where I did lose points. On the arm over arm, I need to strengthen my hands when it comes to holding a rope and get better grip endurance with the rope, and just practice the arm over arm all off season. That's another area that I'm just not happy with. Picking up the sandbag, I need a bit of training with that. I think I'll do some sandbag rows in the off season in speaking with Laws. And I'm going to get a sear bell because I wasn't happy with how uncomfortable that sear bell felt in competition. So I have more to take away to build upon than to celebrate, in my opinion. That being said, this is 8 of 9 victories. I've won 6 of 8 major shows over the last 2 years. I've won 3 major shows both last year and this year, and I walk away as the Rogue Invitational champion. I think in the log press, I've had issues with the cleans a couple of times, and I just need to groove that clean and work it harder and be a bit more disciplined on that. That's another spot where I did lose points. On the arm over arm, I need to strengthen my hands when it comes to holding a rope and get better grip endurance with the rope, and just practice the arm over arm all off season. That's another area that I'm just not happy with. Picking up the sandbag, I need a bit of training with that. I think I'll do some sandbag rows in the off season in speaking with Laws. And I'm going to get a sear bell because I wasn't happy with how uncomfortable that sear bell felt in competition. So I have more to take away to build upon than to celebrate, in my opinion. That being said, this is 8 of 9 victories. I've won 6 of 8 major shows over the last 2 years. I've won 3 major shows both last year and this year, and I walk away as the Rogue Invitational champion. I'm very, very proud of that. And, I'm going to be critical of myself because I have to be, but even with a couple of mistakes, even though I think I should be much better, I came away with a 10-point victory. That is nothing to look down upon. Tom and Thor tied for second. One interesting thing, if I didn't manage to lock out that kettlebell, me, Tom, Thor, all would have tied for first place. We would have had a 3-way 400-pound Husafel for distance, which could have been the coolest end to a strongman contest ever. For the sake of me, I'm happy that it didn't. For the sake of the sport, maybe it was better if I didn't get that kettlebell. Anyway, on the women's side, Inez ended up winning. She was flawless all weekend, absolutely phenomenal. Olga Lashuk in second place and Lucy Underdown in third place. So congratulations to those girls. Financially, this competition is absolutely off the charts for what they've been offered in the past. And they're going to be able to start making careers out of this, which is really, really exciting for the women's side. And hopefully the grassroots can keep up and keep women inspired to continue to strive for the top. I'm extremely humbled by how many people are out there cheering, how many people want to meet me. It's just incredible. Now, I was walking around a little bit on Sunday. I had some obligations for meet and greets. Wanted to spend a little bit of time with sponsors, and one thing I've been struggling with a little bit is that it's very difficult for me now to walk around in places and to not get swarmed by people. And I said no to more fans this weekend than I have probably in my whole career, which I absolutely hate, and it's a big internal struggle. But for anyone watching this, I do want to be able to sign things for you and take pictures with you. The problem is, if it's in a crowd of people, as soon as I stop for one thing, and I know you think it's just one thing, but if I stop for you, then immediately a queue starts forming, and then I have to tell a whole group of people I can't do anything. And so it's really stuck between a rock and a hard place. I ask for your understanding and empathy on that, because it's really overwhelming, and sometimes I just don't know what to do, because it's sort of conflicted if I'm trying to get somewhere or do something, and fans are going to start lining up, and I can't do it, but I'd like to. Anyway, I hope you guys understand that I appreciate you guys so much, and when I say no, I try to be as respectful and as kind as possible about it, but I know that there's probably some people who aren't as happy because all they wanted was a quick signature. But I hope you understand that for me, it doesn't turn into a quick signature. It turns into a big thing where there's a big queue, and it's almost never ending, and I have to walk off. So anyway, thank you very much for watching, guys. As per usual, lift heavy, be kind, and we will catch you tomorrow. Look out for a full recap of the year. We have a lot of fun things coming out to talk about that. And yeah, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. My career is just getting started.